Military rulers in Egypt are under mounting pressure as thousands take yet again to Tahrir Square, reclaiming the revolution. But is the Egyptian revolution under threat? And is a clash between the military and the people likely? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Shakuntala Santharan. An end to the state of emergency, reform of the election law and a roadmap to hand over power to civilians. These were the key demands for activists gathering in Cairo's Tahrir Square on Friday. And despite Egypt's largest political party choosing not to participate, activists were hoping for the largest protest since the uprising began in January. But will Friday's demonstration put enough pressure on what some Egyptians are calling an anti-revolutionary military to change their stance? Shireen Tadros has more from Cairo.
A clear message from protesters to their military rulers. End the emergency law, hand over power and go back to your barracks. After 7 months of military rule, Egyptians say they want their revolution back. They say recent actions by the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces prove the country has simply replaced one regime for another.
The revolution is not complete. There is a lack of openness, a lack of transparency. As long as the emergency law is in place, the revolution is not complete. We got rid of Mubarak and now they want to bring his people back into power?
If they leave us to our democracy, we'll be the most democratic state in the Middle East. We're a country that's 7,000 years old. We taught the world what democracy means.
We first came out onto the streets to protest against the emergency law, and now the emergency law is back in place. They're harassing the media, there's no freedom of press. So we're here today to say no.
Political parties and even presidential hopefuls set up stages in Tahrir Square, showing discontent with the military has spread beyond just individual protesters.
In the end, it wasn't as big a demonstration as the organizers would have wanted. A lot of people here in Egypt do believe in the message of these protests, but not necessarily in the idea of coming to Tahrir to get that message out. 2 months away from elections, many are saying that political parties need to stop complaining and start campaigning.
But the election law announced by authorities this week has sparked fierce debate and anger in the country. Some political parties are threatening to boycott the parliamentary elections due to start in November. They say members of the former ruling party will be able to manipulate the system to ensure a seat in the new parliament. With so much anger and political uncertainty, Egypt is at a delicate point in its transition. The people are demanding a swift transfer of power, while political parties are concerned holding elections under the current conditions will bring back the kind of government they fought so hard to overthrow. Shireen Tadros for Inside Story, Cairo.
For more on this, joining us are our guests. From Cairo, Ramy, el-Swissy, co-founder of the April 6th movement, one of the groups protesting on Friday. And from Exeter, Omar Ashour, Director of Middle East Studies at Exeter University. Omar has just returned from a research tenure in Egypt. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for speaking to Al Jazeera. Ramy, if I could start with you, very familiar scenes there in Tahrir Square as protesters took to the streets yet again. What are you and your fellow protesters so angry about?
Well, first of all, thank you for your for hosting me in your show. And right now, the situation at Tahrir Square, as always, in every time we call for 1 million protests, and it keep going more and more, and it's for the right demands. As for now, we're asking for stopping emergency law, and as a movement, as 6 April Youth Movement, we declared that we will not recognize emergency law anymore, and any trying to arrest any of our members according to emergency law will be counted as a hostage situation and as kidnapping, not as it were counted before as he's a detainee. And that's our situation right now.
You said that there's no reason to keep emergency law in place, but we saw how violent the protests got earlier in September when people broke into the Israeli embassy and burnt cars. Is there some justification for this law to be still in place?
Well, let's be honest for something. How come after 30 years of having an emergency law and after many, let's say, huge number of disaster cases that were a cause for emergency law, some of them were about kidnapping, and some of them caused death to some protesters and some political activists. How come after all these years and after I had a huge revolution like what we got in in Egypt, we still wanted to have an emergency law or have an ugly law like this? It can't be accepted at all ways. And also there is many laws in Egyptian constitutions that could be more efficient than emergency law.
Omar, what do you think? Should emergency law in Egypt be lifted sooner?
I think it should, and it should have been lifted a long time ago. The Supreme Council for the Armed Forces decided that it will stay for 6 months. The 6 months ends in the 30th of September, so today, and therefore there is no reason for enforcing such law. The crisis, the security crisis that is in Egypt, is mainly due to the lack of security sector restructuring, the lack of incentive to go and enforce security within the Interior Ministry ranks, mainly because many of the generals and the colonels that are still there are refusing to do basically the job because of their ties with the ancient regime. So the problem is really has to do with the former regime. So the problem really has to do with the security sector reform and restructuring much more than has to do with just laws on paper and the enforcement of the emergency laws.
Do you think the Military Council is going things about the wrong way? Would you go as far to say that it's anti-revolutionary?
The SCAF has multiple problems. One of them is the transition from military to civilian rule. And this seems to be because of the dynamism of the revolution, because of the lack of a clear leadership. There seemed to be this reluctance to hand over to a very decentralized form of opposition, especially that they will need legal considerations and protection, if you wish, in the post-revolutionary phase. So there is this reluctance. On the other side, there is also the links to the old regime, and many of the generals, whether in the Interior or the Defense Ministry, are worried that they can be pursued legally in the aftermath of the handing power to civilians. So that's an issue, and that's a very common issue in transition to democracies, whether in Latin America, in East Europe, or in Southeast Asia. So there will have to be at one point a constitutional and legal package handed over to guarantee the not legally pursuing or the non-legal pursual of the current generals. There is another point as well, is how much the SCAF is willing, or how far does it want to instate reforms and instate change in the Egyptian political scenery. And so far there hasn't been signs that they are interested in doing such revolutionary changes. So the expectations on the streets is very different from what the SCAF have in mind in terms of change.
Okay, a lot of unhappiness in Egypt, protesters and political parties all clamoring for change. The Military Council has said that the state of emergency will be lifted in June 2012. That's not soon enough for Egyptians. And meeting with Egypt's Foreign Minister, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton too called for a faster end to the law. Let's listen to what she had to say.
We have encouraged and continue to encourage the government to lift the state of emergency. The Supreme Council has said that it will be in a position to do so in 2012. We hope to see the law lifted sooner than that, because we think that is an important step on the way to the rule of law, to the kind of system of checks and balances that are important in protecting the rights of the Egyptian people, to create the context for free and democratic elections.
Omar, what do you think? Is the U.S. pressure plus continuing protests going to be enough to force the military to make the changes that people want, or at least to get them to lift that emergency law sooner?
I think it will be useful, but I'm not sure if it's going to be decisive. What's going to be decisive is the pressures on the street and the unity of the opposition in their demands, the focus on very specific demands, the timeline for handing power to elected civilians, clear timeline for parliamentary elections, presidential elections, the removal of the emergency laws, and the ending to any military tribunals. And in the behind the scenes, a package to guarantee the legal protection, if you wish, for some of the generals. I think this is what is critical, and I think it's the pressure on the streets is going to be the main force leading to the success or the failure of this democratic transition process.
Ramy, is there enough fire in Egyptians, in the protesters, to keep up the pressure on the streets, to keep up the pressure on the military council?
Of course, there is enough fire, and this fire is growing every day with some of the military council laws that does not apply with the political parties and movements, and with all the Egyptian community. They just put laws without asking anyone, and after that they start keep asking what we shall do, how we can fix it. Then they apply what they think it's right, and that's something not acceptable. We will not, through a dictator, to put another example, or let's say to put another scale of dictatorship on long term.
But how long can you keep up these protests for, though?
Well, it's not always with protests. There's more than a way to say I'm very angry with this way of ruling and this way of putting laws without asking anyone. For example, protests are a way, but there is 100 other ways. We could use, we already making a huge diplomatic let's say, relations with the government and with the military council in order to fix some problems. But till this moment, there is no real good intention of fixing the problems, such as activating treasury law, which everybody agrees about it, and everybody need to see it to be active in order to make sure that National Democratic Party, ex-National Democratic Party members will not get once more to the parliament. And anyway, this is what really need at this moment. And on another scale, there is also some communications about the military council, about the military tribunals, in order to change it to civil tribunals, and those who were arrested and detained for 10 and 50 years with, let's say, injustice way, have to be stopped.
Okay. Omar, as Ramy was saying, there are discrepancies in the election law, and political parties have said that they're planning to boycott the upcoming elections if that election law is not changed. Is that in Egypt's best interest, though?
I'm not sure if it's the best strategy to pressure the Supreme Council, mainly because you will have divisions among the opposition parties. It will be very difficult to make if it's a unanimous decision, then maybe it will have some effects, but I think it won't be able to be a consensual decision to boycott. I think participation is key. I think there was a tactic that was tried before to pressure the SCAF, and it worked multiple times, and that is the the demonstrations on the streets and sometimes even the sit-ins in Tahrir proved very effectual. The formula was if you demonstrated in hundreds, they usually arrest some of you, but if you demonstrated in hundreds of thousands, they would arrest Mubarak and try him for you. So I think that was a very clear-cut example on how on this tactic that it works. I'm not sure if boycotting the elections or suspending electoral campaigns will be a right answer unless everybody agrees on it, unless it's done collectively. And that kind of consensus, I don't think that it is going to be realistic or practical.
So unity between the people and political parties vital for Egypt going forward. Can Egypt form a unified opposition, do you think, Omar? Can they get over their many differences?
I think for very specific demands that I just mentioned, it is very critical for them to get over their differences. No democratic transition process becomes successful except with three elements. One of them is the unity of opposition, or at least the temporarily unity of opposition. The other is a willing military establishment to either go along these tactics without spoiling the transition, without taking up arms and spoiling the transition. And the third element is a plan to get out of this transition. And then there is other factors, but these are the most critical. So I think the lack of leadership in the revolution was a source of its strength during Mubarak time, because you cannot eliminate, there is no leadership to eliminate. But now it is a source of weakness, and I think it is very critical at this point to have at least a temporary leadership to lead the way. We saw earlier the 7 presidential candidates negotiating and discussing the issues of transition and trying to negotiate with the military council on a very specific demands that everybody agreed upon. I think 6 of them issued a statement yesterday in that regards. Also, we saw the similar situation with the political parties. So I think there are good steps in forming a leadership ahead to this revolution. And I think it is very critical at this point to push in the direction of handing over power to an elected civilian government.
Ramy, how do ordinary Egyptians feel about this plan by a lot of political parties to boycott the elections? I mean, it would certainly leave you with fewer people to vote for.
Well, in order to help ordinary people to understand who they shall vote for and stuff like this, we had 2 campaigns, one called White Circle and one called Black Circle. The White Circle is doing good for everyone. It's just having a list with how to vote, who you shall vote for, if he's helpful for you as a member in his area or not. Should you vote for him because few points, and also we got some statistics about few candidates and stuff like this. And on the Black Circle is opposite to all what I said in the White Circle, and it also will not only have ex-National Democratic Party members, but it will also have members that will be against the laws, and the members against and members who will use ways like paying money in order to get people to vote for them, or doing anything that will be against the right way of voting.
Omar, can we look a bit closer at this disputed election law? If the military council isn't trying to keep Mubarak allies in power, as many people are suspecting or accusing them of doing, then why isn't the military council opening up all the seats to this election?
There's a big question mark on the behavior or the determinants of the behavior of the military council. Some attribute it to factionalism within the council, some wanting a faster pace of change, a more deeper change in the political structure of Egypt. mainly interested in having a package of legal and constitutional protection for the military establishment and for its generals. Other factions seem to be more willing to involve into day-to-day politics and to uphold the former status quo, even if it can't uphold it totally, but uphold it mostly, or protect its remains within the system. So this is one explanation for why it's acting in this non-consistent fashion. The other things is that there are also the regime is not completely demolished. There are generals in the army, in the interior ministry, that have sympathies with the former regime, so strong ties and strong links. There are also businessmen. There is the NDP figures that are around and willing to enter the parliament again. So all these links and ties are there. So it's not over yet. And obviously this forms a very strong lobby group on whoever is in power in Egypt, whether it's the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces or any elected civilian. So I think this is the counter lobby to the revolution that it still exists, and it's still powerful due to its material weight, whether we're talking about money or we're talking about influence or we're talking even about arms in the hands of generals in the interior ministry and these militias of thugs, between quotations, that operate on their behalf. So I think this is quite a critical factor in determining the behavior of the SCAF.
Ramy, where do you think Egypt is heading if the people don't get what they want, if life doesn't get better for ordinary Egyptians? Could we see a clash between the military and the people?
Well, it's not about having a clash, and it's not about all this. It's about the people demanding for their rights, the people asking for the basic needs for their rights, people asking for fair wages, people asking for fair demands, people asking for most of the things that really would be interested for them, and it would be changing the way of their lives. About having a clash or not, it's not the point right now. It's all about getting those demands to the people, and that's what will make the people rest and will not lead to any clash. And that's what we are as a movement looking for, and I think we are as political parties and groups also trying to do in order to make the community much better, and in order to help Egyptians inside and abroad to solve their problems and also to fix what's required and to get them their demands.
How far would you go, though? Could we see bloodshed as people become more desperate for change?
Well, let's say we have lines like Tahrir Square is our line, and we will go as far as the people demand to get their rights.
And are we seeing a return to the tactics of the January uprising? Has a revolution actually ended? Is it just a continuation of the revolution that began in January?
It still continues. A revolution will not stop by any day right now. It's just turning from phase to another phase and with demand to another demand.
Over to you, Omar. How do you see Egypt moving forward? How optimistic are you that it's on its way to true democracy?
Despite everything, I am quite optimistic, mainly because of the determinism of the young activists, their determinism, their maturity, their dedication. I was in Egypt the last couple of months, and I've been sitting with friends who are very much involved in activism, and I am really amazed and surprised at their dedication. There's no personal gain at all for them. I mean, they would do very much, they would become very rich people under Mubarak without any problem. but they are taking from their time, taking from their energy, taking from their career tracks, and focusing more and more on pushing towards democratic Egypt. So this spirit willing for freedom and this continuous determination to continue the struggle until we see a democratic free Egypt is what makes me very optimistic. Plus the maturity and the intelligence of many of the young activists that I saw in Egypt and been interacting with in the last 2 months.
Thank you both for your time. In Cairo, Ramy el-Swissy, and in Exeter, Omar Ashour. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We always welcome your comments and suggestions. Please do email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Goodbye.